Thanks for watching. This is Danny, and thanks for joining me today in my greenhouse on my Feed the Beast Infinity estate. I am really excited to demonstrate what I'm going to demonstrate to you today, and that is autocrafting and automation with Botania. And we're going to be working today mostly with, of course, applied energistics for autocrafting, and I'm assuming that you know a little bit about autocrafting with, or at least you know the basics about autocrafting with applied energistics. And if you don't, I do have a couple of tutorials out for that as well. And then we're also going to be working quite a bit with Steve's Factory Manager, and I will show you kind of the necessary information you'll need to know for that. I really like the in-world crafting and the novelty of it, and the fact that you can, you know, throw stuff in your mana pools, and you can throw stuff in your portal to Alfheims and get stuff back, and it's really cool. But I also really like to automate things so that I don't have to manually craft and do all that fun stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a peek down in my secret basement. Yes, this greenhouse does have a basement, unlike most greenhouses. And here it is. And here's all my autocrafting stuff. So down here, I have autocrafted everything in Botania, from the Petal Apothecary all the way through the portal to Alfheim. So we're going to be doing, and also the Pure Daisies, the Runic Altar, and of course the mana pool, and I also have the alchemy catalyst underneath, and then we're also automating the mana production with the endoflames. So we'll take a look at how all that works, and of course Terra Steel. So everything's automated here, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. So let's get started with the Petal Apothecary. This is probably one of the simpler things. So what I'm using to automate the Petal Apothecary is, first of all, to keep water in the Petal Apothecary. Okay, I removed the facade so we can see what's going on. So we've got an aqueous accumulator, a fluid transposer, and an autonomous activator, and some pipes. And what these guys are doing is just keeping the Petal Apothecary full of water. So I've actually also got the same setup for my Petal Apothecary upstairs, so that when we manually create stuff in the Petal Apothecary and it uses the water, it'll automatically refill itself. So this is just a quick, easy piece of automation you can do before you even do any autocrafting, or even independent of autocrafting. So the way this works is we've got a bucket of water in the autonomous activator. Then I've filled the rest up with cobblestone, just to make sure that it only grabs one bucket of water, especially since we have more than one aqueous accumulator in the same network here. If you only have one aqueous accumulator, if you're only doing this for one Petal Apothecary, this isn't necessarily necessary, but it doesn't hurt. So I put cobblestone here. We've got one slot for the bucket, and I'm telling it first slot only. So we're not going to do round robin. We're not going to randomly use. We're going to do first slot only, right click. So what this guy is doing is it is constantly right clicking on the Petal Apothecary with a bucket of water. Now since the Petal Apothecary is already full right now, it will have no effect. But what's going to happen is, as soon as we use the Petal Apothecary, that bucket is going to empty out into the Petal Apothecary, and we're going to have an empty bucket in here. So we've got a filter on the top. I'm using Ender.io item conduits. You can really use any kind of item duct, but I'm using the Ender.io ones because I like working with them. And I've got a filter on here. We have it set to in and out. I've actually got a filter for both in and out. So for insert, I have a basic item filter. This is actually the cheapest filter, and it's all we need because it gives us 5 slots, and we actually only need 1. And we're telling it, insert a full bucket of water. So nothing is going to get inserted into this aqueous accumulator other than a full bucket of water. And then we're going to extract an empty bucket of water. Same thing, basic item filter, empty bucket of water. So it's not going to extract anything from this autonomous activator except an empty bucket of water. So once we use our Petal Apothecary, that water is emptied. We have an empty bucket of water. It gets pulled into our item network. And then over here we have a filter saying we will insert into the fluid transposer a empty bucket of water. Now if we take a look at our fluid transposer, now of course we've got the aqueous accumulator here set up in between two water blocks. I've got a water block there too. So it's always full of water and there's always water available. So if we look at the configuration of our fluid transposer, we'll see that it's pulling from the bottom. So it's pulling water from the aqueous accumulator. And you can see the highlight matches. So it's a blue highlight. And we're also pulling from this side, which is where our item conduit is coming in. And that's where our bucket is going to land. So an empty bucket comes in, it lands right here. We have this set to fill bucket, so we should see a full bucket right there. You click it to toggle and that'll empty bucket. So what that means is if we put a full bucket of water in here, it's going to empty and take the water, and then you're going to end up with an empty bucket. But we want to end up with a full bucket of water. So empty bucket comes in, gets filled up, full bucket ends up here, and we have our red for output on the top. So then we have item conduit on the top that doesn't have any filters, because we don't need any filters here, because the only thing that would ever come out of this thing is a full bucket of water. And it will go back into our aqueous accumulator, whichever one needs it, because we happen to have two aqueous accumulators here, and since there's only one slot, if this one's already full, then it's going to put it in this one. So these aqueous accumulators will always have a full bucket of water no matter what. So that's part one of automating the Petal Apothecary. So part two is getting the items in here. So we're going to be dropping petals in here, and we're going to be dropping seeds in here in order to do whatever crafting we need to do in our Petal Apothecary. And what we're using for that is a Steve's Factory Manager item valve with an Emmy Interface on it. And of course this is going to be connected to a Steve's Factory Manager machine inventory manager. This is all for other stuff, but for this particular auto-crafting, we're just going to need these two things. And then we're also going to need some kind of an output chest. So right now this chest here is actually our output chest, and it has some Emmy import bus on it. So altogether what we're going to need is an Emmy interface, an item valve, a machine inventory manager, a chest, and an Emmy import bus. And then we're probably also going to need some inventory cables to connect these things. And these are also Steve's Factory Manager. And it basically connects them all into a single network. So when you the way the item valve works, and we're going to be using a lot of these, for actually most of our auto crafting is using item valves. So I'll kind of explain real briefly how they work. In fact, all of our auto crafting is using Steve's Factory Manager in one way or another, because Steve's Factory Manager is really well suited for auto crafting in Botania, because it has a lot of world interactive blocks. So in this case, the item valve is an inventory. It's an inventory block similar to a chest or a barrel or something like that that carries inventory. But instead of having inventory inside of itself, its inventory is whatever items are floating in the block that it's pointing to. So in this case, you can see this little kind of hole thing here is pointing in this direction. So whatever happens to be floating in this area is the inventory of the item valve. So by floating, I mean like this, you know. We've got this item that's just floating in the world. If there was an item valve right here that was pointing to this, and you queried the inventory of that item valve's inventory would be a sapling. So in this case, what's happening is we have our auto crafting recipes in our Emmy interface. In this case, I actually only have one. But of course we can put all of our auto-crafting recipes in here for anything that we make in the Petal Apothecary, all the different flowers and everything else. In this case, we have one pattern. It creates a pure daisy with 4 mystical white petals and 1 barley seed. I just happen to have a lot of barley seeds, so I'm using barley seeds. And what's going to happen when the Emmy Interface inserts those items into the item valve, it's going to drop them into the block that it's pointing at. So consequently, they will end up dropping into the Petal Apothecary, at which point the thing will be crafted. So in this case, the pure daisy will be crafted. And then the pure daisy is going to be sitting there in this block space. Now unfortunately, the Emmy Interface is not able to pull items from the item valve, but Steve's Factory Manager, Inventory Manager can. So then in our Inventory Manager, now don't get frightened when we look at this, because I actually have one Inventory Manager for the entire network. All this stuff, except for actually with the exception of the mana production, all of our auto-crafting stuff is in this single machine Inventory Manager. Boom. So there's a lot of stuff in here. But for the Petal Apothecary, there's actually only 2. No, I'm sorry. There's actually only 1 trigger, and that's this done item valve. So what this guy is doing, we have a trigger that's running every 2 seconds. The input is the item valve, and I've actually got a bunch of item valves selected in here because I'm actually multi-purposing this. But our item valve at the Petal Apothecary is selected as an input. We're blacklisting nothing, so any items will get output to our output chest. So what's going to happen is when we drop our petals and seeds in here, they instantly go into the Petal Apothecary. So the Inventory Manager isn't going to see them, and it's not going to pick them up. But when we get our flower, or whatever we're producing in here, Steve's Factory Manager, Machine Inventory Manager is going to see it, it's going to grab it, and it's going to throw it in this chest, which has the import bus, and it's going to get pulled back into our Emmy system, and then our Emmy system will see that the auto-crafting has been complete. So let's test this out. Our Emmy system, which happens to be in the house behind us. We say next, we say start. We should see some flowers get dropped, and then they just disappear. We didn't even see it happen. They got pulled back into this chest, and now if we look in our Emmy system, we'll see that we've got a pure daisy. Now we have 6. So that's it. That's it for the Petal Apothecary, and it doesn't really seem to matter. I mean, when you're doing this manually, you put your seeds in last. In this case, it doesn't really seem to matter. The seeds will just sit there until the other petals are in there, and then they'll drop in. And it happens so fast that you can just make your seeds a part of the crafting recipe, and it'll work just fine. So, alright, moving down the line, let's take a look at our Runic Altar. There's one thing that makes the Runic Altar a little bit more complicated than everything else. No, I'm sorry. There are 2 things. One, again, we've got an autonomous activator over here. And we've also got an input chest up here. And the reason is because if you remember how the Runic Altar works, or if you know how the Runic Altar works, you drop all your items in there, and then you right-click with the Wand of the Forest. And then when it's done, you drop a Livingwood on there, or a Livingrock on there, and then you right-click with the Wand of the Forest again. So we've got an autonomous activator here with the Wand of the Forest that's just right-clicking on this thing all the time. So it doesn't seem to matter that it's right-clicking on it all the time. And then over here, we've got a redstone comparator and a redstone receiver from Steve's Factory Manager. Our Lexica Botania, it tells us that if you put a redstone comparator next to your Runic Altar, that it will output a 1 when the Runic Altar is accepting mana, and it will output a 2 when it's ready for its Livingwood. So when it's basically done crafting and it's ready for the Livingwood Livingwood rock, yes. So what we've got here is we've got a chest, and the Emmy Interface is attached to that chest. And then here are our rune patterns. Now there's something special we have to do with this chest. So we have to tell it the blocking mode. By default, the blocking mode is ignore the contents of the target inventory, but we have to set blocking mode to do not push crafting items if inventory contains item. And the reason we have to do that is because when we create our runes, let's say we're making our rune of water, we have our bone meal, our sugarcane, our living rock, our fishing rod, and our 3 mana steel ingots. We do not drop that living rock right away, and we only want these items to be dropped. So what's going to happen is it's going to pull our machine inventory manager, and I'll show you the logic for this in a second. The machine inventory manager is going to pull everything out of here except for the living rock, and it's going to stick it in our autonomous activator, which is then going to right click with it on because I've got it set up for round robin. It's going to right click on our Runic Altar, and therefore adding those things to the Runic Altar, and they'll start floating around. But we don't drop our living rock until we get a redstone signal of 2 from our redstone comparator. At that point, we drop the living rock with our item valve, because we have to drop it, we can't just right click with it. We drop it with the item valve, and then we right click with the wand of the forest, which is happening all the time, and boom, it gets sucked back into the item valve. Our rune gets sucked back into the item valve, thrown in our same drop chest that has our Emmy import bus on it, and then it gets sent back into our Emmy network. And at that point, once it drops that living rock, our chest is empty again, which means that the Emmy interface can send some more items in there for the next crafting recipe, if we happen to be crafting more than one at a time. So let's take a look at the logic behind this. So rune input. So here's another trigger that runs every second. It checks the input chest up there. That's the rune input chest for anything except living rock. So we've got a blacklist, living rock. So everything else is okay. It's going to pull everything out of that chest except living rock. It's going to stick it on the Runic Altar. So it's going to output it to the autonomous activator that's clicking on the Runic Altar. Then we have our rune complete trigger, which is just a trigger that runs every 2 seconds. And it's using a redstone condition. And it's checking our redstone node, our redstone receiver down here that the comparator is pointing to. And it's checking to see if the strength, the redstone signal, is 2. It has to be exactly 2. So anywhere from 2 to 2. If that's true, then we're going to grab the inventory from the chest, from the input chest up here, whitelisting the living rock. So before we grabbed everything except the living rock over here. Now we're grabbing just the living rock and we're dropping it into our item valve. Our living rock. So that will, and then this guy will then right click on it with the wand of the forest, and then it'll end up, the rune will end up here. So if it's false, if the redstone comparator is not outputting 2, then we grab the inventory out of our item valve on the downside, and we blacklist living rock. So in this case, we want to make sure that our system does not pull the living rock out before the autonomous activator has a chance to right click on the Runic Altar. And that's the Runic Altar. And moving on to our mana pool. Now this one is actually pretty simple. All we really have to do is drop something in there and we get something back. So that one is actually, we've got our Emmy interface on the side. And here's some of our crafting recipes. We've got an item valve just like the other two. And then of course we have our mana pool, and I've got a spark on it so that it's always full. I actually have a dominant spark here so that this mana pool is always full, and that's it. So and we don't have any special triggers for this, so it's just using this same trigger, done item valve, every 2 seconds. If there's something in there, we pull it out and we put it in our drop chest over here, which then gets pulled by our Emmy import bus back into our Emmy system. So that's it for those 3 things. Now this guy is pretty similar. If you can kind of see through the portal there that we've got a item valve back there, and we've also got, actually let's just take a look. We've got an item valve, and then we also have our Emmy interface over here. So it's basically the same idea, and we've only got 1 recipe in there so far. We're creating 1 pixie dust with 1 mana pearl. So our Emmy system is going to throw a pixie dust in here. It's going to end up in our portal, and then it's going to end up with, wait, did I say pixie dust? It's going to throw a mana pearl in there. It's going to end up in the portal, and then we're going to have a pixie dust sitting there. Now this is actually, I've got item cables, or I have inventory manager cables, inventory cables going all the way over here. So this one is a little bit special because we want to make sure that it doesn't pull back the mana pearl or whatever else we stick in there. And since there's actually only 9 different recipes that you can craft in the portal to Alfheim, we can actually specify a whitelist and say these are the 9 items. Actually, I only have 8 because I have no plans on working with the bees, but basically I'm just selecting the different items that we can craft in there, and I'm saying if these items exist in the item valve, grab them and throw them into that same inventory chest, or the same input chest that we're putting everything else, or output chest rather, that we're putting everything else in. So that one's actually pretty simple. And Terra Steel, guess what? It's the same thing. We've got our Emmy interface, which pulls, it has 1 crafting recipe because it's the only thing you can create on this thing. Creates 1 Terra Steel ingot with a mana diamond, a mana steel ingot, and 1 mana pearl into our item valve, which happens to be pointing toward this thing. I put some glass around it just to make sure the items don't end up floating away. In this case, we actually have a special one for this one because we don't want to pull. We don't want to pull out because some of those items might sit there for a few seconds depending on the availability of mana. So we want to make sure that we check to make sure it's a Terra Steel ingot in there. Since it's the only thing that we can craft in there, if there's a Terra Steel ingot, grab it, throw it in the output chest. The output chest. So the same output chest. So same concept, except we're just filtering it to make sure we don't end up pulling something else. And then finally, well, second from finally, I guess, because our penultimate thing that we're going to look at are block gates. So for the Livingwood and Livingrock, we're using a block called a Blockade, and this is also Steve's Factory Manager, of course. Now when you place a Blockade down, it's going to look like this. It's going to have kind of 2 rings there, and what that's telling you is that the inventory of this Blockade, now remember with the item valve, the inventory of the item valve is whatever happens to be floating in the space in front of it. So floating items. The inventory of the block gate is what is placed in the direction that it's facing. So in this case, these are all facing up. So if we put, a piece of marble here, that's actually going to be part of the inventory. When you query the block gate, that's going to be part of its inventory. Now, by default, when you see this, that means the 2 blocks that it's facing are going to be part of that thing's inventory. So when you place things, but we don't want that, right? Because with the pure daisy is only going to convert items that are at the same Y level that it's at. So we only want it to look at one block, the one block above it. So you have to shift right click. If you right click, you get this. If you shift right click, you get that, which tells it only the one block above it is its inventory. And you have to do it with an empty hand. So what we have to do here, the inventory manager is capable of placing blocks on the block gate. It's also capable of mining the blocks. This one's the most complicated one because we've got 16 of these guys, right? And we don't want to do 16 triggers. I mean, that would suck. That would be way too much work. So what we're doing is we're using the for each loop. And what this guy's going to do is it's going to loop through every one of these block gates. 10 Livingwood. So what's going to happen is our Emmy system is going to drop them in this chest. Our thing that we just looked at is going to loop through each one of these things, and it's going to say, does it have Livingwood on it? No. Okay, let's check the chest. Grab one of these and throw it on there. And now we could actually go into our Emmy system and say, we also want 10 living rock. Not 110, how about just 10? And we'll see that they'll start to appear here. The stones will appear. But we've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The rest of them are still sitting in that chest. So our trigger is constantly looping through these, checking, do we have living rock yet? Do we have living wood yet? Do we have living rock yet? Do we have living wood yet? And it doesn't yet. So it's not doing anything. Stone or wood there, it doesn't do anything. So it's just checking, yep, we got wood. Okay, so now that one disappeared. It just harvested it, and now it's going to replace it with the stone. And that's the rest of the stone. So it emptied out that chest. But what we're going to do is we're going to use variables and a for each loop. So what's going to happen, first of all, we create two variables. So we click the create container variable over here to create variables. And the first variable is going to be a white variable. And that's basically, you can have variables of several different colors. You can have one variable for each color. So this is a white variable, and that's the default color. And we're going to select, under containers, we're going to select all of our block gates. So we can type in block gates here, block gates to filter, and then we just click every one of these to select it. Of course, I'm unselecting them because they were already selected, but you want to select every single block gate in the network. Then we're going to have a second variable that's going to be an orange variable, and we don't do anything with that one. We just change it to orange and we leave it alone. And then we create a trigger. So we click here to create trigger. I called it Pure Daisy just so I'd remember what it is. This one's running every 2 seconds, and it's doing a for each. And the for each loop will basically run through a list and perform some kind of action on each element in the list. So in this case, the list is the white variable that we just set to all of our block gates. So we have a list of block gates in the white variable, and what the for each is going to do is it's going to take the orange variable and it's going to set it to a block gate. So it's going to go through each block gate in the white variable and set the orange variable to that block gate. So we're going to run a condition on, we can click here to show all variables. On our orange variable, which is a block gate, target up, and we're going to say, hey, do we have a living rock or do we have living wood? If we do, we're going to do an input output. So input is the orange variable, upside, living rock or living wood. We're going to grab them and output them to, take a guess, the output chest. The same output chest that we're outputting everything else. So for each block gate, we check to see if it's got living wood or living rock on it, and if so, we grab it and we output it to the same output chest that we're outputting everything else to. If not, then we check, does our orange variable have oak wood or stone? If it does, we don't do anything. We just leave it there because we want it. We want the pure daisy to do its magical work on it. If it doesn't, so at this point we've already checked. Does it have living rock or living wood? No. Does it have rock or stone or wood? No. So that means it's empty, right? So now we're going to check our input chest. So the iron chest, remember we said before that our Emmy system is going to drop our stone and oak wood into this chest, and we're going to check now. So we've already decided there's nothing there's nothing in our item valve or our block gate. So we check our iron chest, doesn't matter what side because it's a chest, for oak wood or stone. Now make sure you right click on it, specify amount 1. This is very important because each block gate can only hold one piece of wood. So if you end up grabbing more than, or stone, if you grab more than one, you're going to end up with items floating around down there. So if you see items floating around, you'll want to double check to make sure that you've right clicked each of these, specify amount 1, so that it grabs exactly one piece and it outputs it to, take a guess, the orange variable. So the orange variable again is the block gate. And that's it. That's the whole thing. So we're running through our list. We're checking, do we have living wood or living rock? If we do, we grab it, we put it in the output chest. If we don't, we check, do we have rock or wood? No. If so, we leave it alone. If not, we grab a piece from the chest and we output it to the item block gate. So if you have any questions, if anything is confusing or not clear, let me know, and I'll try to clear it up for you. Or if there's anything else you want me to cover, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this, if you got something out of it, if you learned a little bit or whatever, please click the thumbs up button and let your friends share it with your friends and all that crazy stuff. So thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time. Bye bye.